I want to go through a brief analysis of Terry Crews's interview with the Lemon, Don Lemon of CNN, and the discussion of Terry Crews's statements about Black Lives Matter. Side note, I have met Terry Crews before. He is an affable and kind person, full of hope. Originally, before I met him in the gym actually, but he was discussing on the Adam Carolla show that it's not about taking a piece of somebody else's pie. It's about going out and creating your own pie. Terry is a very hopeful, hardworking person, and his personality definitely shines through on his show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I'm a big fan of his, so here goes.
All right, everybody, please listen to this segment because actor and activist Terry Crews facing backlash for tweeting, "We must ensure Black Lives Matter doesn't morph into Black Lives Better." Here's how he explained it. Are all white people bad? No. Are all black people good? No. Knowing this reality, I stand on my decision to unite with good people, no matter the race, creed, or ideology. Given the number of threats against this decision, I also decide to die on this hill. Terry Crews joins me now. Terry, man, you stepped in it.
What a horrible initial framing. As if Terry Crews did something wrong by trying to unite people, by stating his opinions. You can definitely predict that this interview is going to go downhill because the Lemon is already demonstrating his hostility.
You say that you're willing you say you're willing to die on this hill. You've taken a lot of heat for this. Explain what you were thinking and why it's so important that you die on this hill.
Well, again, I wanted to bring up the fact that, there are some very, very, militant type forces in Black Lives Matter. And what I was issuing was a warning. It's one of those things where I've been a part of different groups, I've been a part of different things, and you see how extremes can really can go far and can go wild. And then when you issue a warning, and when a warning is seen as detrimental to the movement, how can you ever have checks and balances? In the 60s and 70s, airplanes went down all the time. And the reason they found out why they did was because the pilots could never be questioned. And when you have the leaders of the Black Lives Movement who are now talking about, if we don't get our demands, we're going to burn it down.
It's absolutely the case that a Black Lives Matter leader, one of the original founders, I believe, Hank Newsom, stated just the other day, if this country doesn't give us what we want, we will burn down the system and replace it. I can be speaking figuratively. I can be speaking literally. So a BLM leader wants to make a not so veiled threat against the public good, against the public at large. Minneapolis and many other cities have already seen businesses looted, burned to the ground, people dying, vandalism. I believe that he likely means it literally. They are demanding what they want and they're going to get it. It's terrorism. Why can't we call him out on this?
Other Black people who are talking about working with other whites and other races, they're being viewed as sellouts or called Uncle Toms. You start to understand that you are now, being controlled. You're not being treated as loved. You're actually being controlled. Someone wants to control the narrative.
Of course, this is 100% true. You're either with us or you're against us. You're indoctrinated or you're not. If you stand in the way of our master plan, you will be excluded from it as well as ostracized and ridiculed until we get bigger and stronger, and in which case standing against us will have more negative repercussions. It's the same thing that any cult does. Reward loyalty and punish dissent.
And I viewed it as a very, very dangerous self-righteousness that was developing that really viewed themselves as better. It was almost a supremacist move.
So let me jump in,
where
Terry.
they viewed that their Black lives mattered a lot more than mine.
Okay, so let me jump in here. There's a lot that you said. You think Black Lives Matter is, you said you think it's an extreme movement? Because it's now part of the...
No, this is the thing. It's a great mantra. it's the true mantra. Black lives do matter. But when you're talking about an organization, you're talking about the leaders, you're talking about the people who are responsible
Okay,
for
I got
putting
you.
these
I
things
got you. I got
together.
you. So let me,
It's
but
two different things.
Terry,
Yes, that's why they have the mantra, because it's impossible to say no to it. What it is, it's very slick marketing. And you have to be able to separate out the propaganda from the leadership and from the desires of the group, of the organization. But it's very difficult to do so publicly without receiving scorn or worse in return. And that's Terry's point, and that's exactly what Terry's experiencing in these moments.
you realize that even during the civil rights movement that Dr. King was seen as extreme. That movement was seen as extreme. To people who don't want to make change, movements are seen as extreme. You can paint them easily as an extreme when they are not.
Okay, the lemon is conflating the desires of the BLM movement with Martin Luther King and his outcomes for his civil rights movement. This is a very sneaky tactic, and if you're not aware of it, it's very hard and difficult to separate the two out because nobody wants to be seen in the remotest way of criticizing Dr. King. Dr. King, in this case, is being used as a shield for BLM and for Don Lemon. And we must be able to distinguish one movement from the other based on their individual goals. The BLM is led by Marxist organizers who want reparations for people that weren't even born in America and destruction of the nuclear family. They want to upend what is a largely working system. It's extreme. Dr. Martin Luther King, meanwhile, wanted equal rights and opportunity for all. Which one is more noble?
This is very true. But also, when you're talking about MLK, you talk about Nelson Mandela, and even Malcolm X, they all realized that you had to have a non-racial component to these kind of movements, or there will be resentment. There will be get back. There will be one of these people will tend to listen. I don't want to move from one oppressor to the next. And one thing that really shocks
who's the
me
next
when I look
oppressor?
at
Who's the next oppressor?
Just check out the look of anger and contempt as Don Lemon discusses with Terry. Watch it again, just so you see the emotional state where he's coming from.
and one thing that really shocks
who's the
me
next
when I look
oppressor?
He's impossible to like. Continuing.
oh, when I describe this, when you look in the city of Chicago, there are 9 children who died by gun violence, by black on black gun violence, from June 20th all the way to today. And you're talking about even with the Atlanta child murders, there were 28 kids who died in 2 years. You're talking about a month, and you have 9 black kids, and the Black Lives Matter movement has said nothing about this
What does
kind
that
of
have
thing.
to do with equality, though, Terry?
I thought this was about Black Lives. Isn't that the banner that you're flying over your protest? Black Lives Matter? Is it about Black lives or is it about equality? Don Lemon is sweeping all those deaths under the rug. It's almost as if those lives do not matter to him. Aren't those Black lives?
I don't understand what that has to do with equality.
Do you really want to ask an actual question or do you want to answer it for him?
I don't understand what that has to do with equality.
Look at Terry Crews wanting to answer and having to hold himself back.
Because listen, there's crime. There are people in those communities those people aren't just being nonchalant about gun violence. I lived in Chicago. There are many people who are working in those communities to try to get rid of the gun violence. The gun culture in this country is prevalent.
We're not talking about gun culture. We're talking about crime. We're talking about murder, which last time I checked was pretty high up the list of crimes, Lemon.
But I don't understand what that has to do with a movement that's for equality for black people. It's not mutually exclusive that if you care about equality for black people, that somehow you're going to stop random violence or, unfortunately, kids from being shot. It just seems like apples and oranges.
Terry Crews is sincerely trying to discuss Black Lives Mattering. Once again, this is the mantra that you are actively promoting. This is the way that this organization is receiving so much support. Whether or not you think that black people are being treated equally under the law is an almost entirely different story. This is your rallying cry, and again, why you have the support that you do. You would get far less of it, guaranteed, if your banner said something different.
It's not that way. This is the thing, Don. Black people need to hold other Black people accountable. I said this the same thing. This is the Black America's version of the Me Too movement. If anything is going to change, we ourselves need to look at our own communities and look at each other and say, this thing cannot go down. And this is the thing, too. There are a lot of great, great people there who are held hostage, by people who literally are running these neighborhoods with violence and then claiming that Black Lives Matter. When you look at the parents of these little kids who are saying, hey, man, why aren't they speaking up for me too? And then this is what I'm saying. When I look at this whole thing about, it's about who is controlling the narrative. It's got to be all Black Lives Matter. And what's happened is that because I even challenged it, because I even questioned and warned people,
Terry,
I became like if I told you to wear a mask,
but Terry,
they want to kick you out.
You're a high-profile person. You're writing things out there. You know you're going to get backlash. You know people are going to respond to what you're saying on Twitter. So I don't think you should be surprised by that. I have a skin as tough as an armadillo because of what I do, and I think maybe you should adapt that.
This is a total mind read. You're lecturing Terry Crews rather than responding to his point. He's getting backlash from you, Lemon. You're beating on him with your media whip and telling him to toughen up as he's explaining his thoughts.
So the Black Lives Matter movement is about police brutality and injustice in that manner, not about what's happening in Black neighborhoods. There are people who are working on that issue.
So I've started a movement. It's called Ocean Cleanup. And I've gotten hundreds of millions of dollars of donations. And you, come along and say, hey, why don't you come over here and help Boy and Slat clean up all the plastic out of the Pacific Ocean, the great garbage heap that's there. Or how about you just prevent sewage from going into the bay? Or help us clean up these 100 beaches around the world. And my response is, what? What are you talking about? Ocean Cleanup is solely about keeping Zuma Beach clean in Malibu. Just the sands on Zuma Beach. Anything else is out of my purview. You want to create some other organization to go that? Feel free. So it's about Zuma Beach. Basically, my Ocean Cleanup is propagating a lie to get backing and finance. I'm falsely narrating what my organization is about via my propaganda, via my marketing. Oh, look, I'm really sorry that fish are eating microscopic shards of plastics from bottles that are disintegrating in the middle of the ocean, and that this is what they're ingesting, which goes into the human food chain. That there are oil spills everywhere, and that cruise ships are dumping sewage where schools of fish are breeding. But Ocean Cleanup, I have to make clear, it's just about Zuma Beach. Also, can I point out to Mr. Lemon that in addition to being against police brutality, as he states, BLM is also actively anti-Israel, in favor of disruption of the nuclear family, which as a father of two, I find to be an absolutely horrific Marxist idea, and seeking reparations for people who weren't even born in the country just based solely on the color of their skin. They are a black supremacist organization. But unfortunately, Terry fails to address that point, and certainly the Lemon is not going to offer up those facts. His goal, his mission, is to frame Black Lives Matter as the angelic halo that will solve police brutality. And who really cares about all those black children who died anyways at the hands of other black men? And by the way, hopefully nobody clips that individual point. It was completely sarcastic.
And if you want to start that issue, why don't you start it? Do you understand what I'm saying?
But when you look at the organization, police brutality is not the only thing they're talking about.
I know that. I agree, but that's not what the Black Lives Matter movement is about, Terry.
You sing-songy, patronizing little bitch Lemon. Terry is being 100% sincere, and you talk over him and obfuscate his points. Remember when he opened up the interview telling Terry that he had stepped in it? Here he is driving that narrative home.
Black Lives Matter is about police brutality and about criminal justice. It's not about what happens in communities when it comes to...
What a smug and arrogant prick. He sees that Terry is trying to talk. What a horrific interviewer. Honestly, I honestly believe that Don Lemon is just truly a bad person.
Crime, black on black crime. People who live near each other, black people, kill each other. Same as whites. 80-some% of white people are killed by white people because of proximity.
Very true.
It's the same thing with black people.
Of course, black people represent 13% of the population and commit 52% of American murders. It's not quite the same, is it, Don? Also, I had a friend who deemed me a white nationalist for quoting that FBI statistic. And Don is right about one thing. It definitely is black on black crime.
That happens in every single neighborhood. But that doesn't, again, I'm not saying that's not important that those kids died, but it's a different movement.
Listen, I understand what you're saying. I totally understand. It is about police brutality. That should never be accepted. Yeah. I am not saying that that's not it, but there's more there. Okay. And when I look at, if they have more on their agenda, we need to ask them about what else is on that agenda other than police brutality. And that's all I'm doing. Questioning, warning, watching. And if that bothers you, now that bothers me. Because if I can't warn you, we are equal. If we're equal, I should be able to say something as equal.
I gotta go. We'll see you. Terry, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Look at the way he mockingly laughs at Terry, who's here basically bearing out his heart. Do you think that Don Lemon goes home to his house and feels good about himself? I really mean that. Like, I know I'm not a fan of the guy, but part of me actually feels sorry for him because I know what misery he must feel inside being this dishonest and obfuscating. Or maybe he really is that hateful and partisan. Either way, I don't envy Don Lemon in the least. Look, the purpose of this is just to demonstrate to you how the game is played. This interview, this obfuscation, is once again to silence voices critical of the BLM movement. This serves as a warning shot to anybody else who would dare get into the fray against the movement. Please share this material and by all means give it a thumbs up on YouTube and subscribe. Peace and blessings. My man Terry Crews, great respect to you. The Lemon, you are a sour, sour, sour man. Peace out, everybody.